Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, we hope, here at the live studios in Radha Lane, Houston, Texas, right down the footpath from Sri Sri Radha Nilamadava's beautiful temple. We've heard that our experience the last 2 days is not unique. Bhakta Patrick went online and found out that Facebook has made a recent update, and there's lots of complaints from people experiencing the same kinds of things that we experience. So I don't think it's the phone or even our Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is working fine over there, and it's not such a good reception over there as it is here. So here we're going to start, and then if we have to stop and start again to do that, we'll do it, in installments. And if not, all the better. Hare Krishna. Okay, let's hear Srila Sanatana Goswami's prayer glorifying the Srimad-Bhagavatam. I never get tired of hearing it. I've been hearing it every day for the last, 2 years? And every time I hear it, it gets better and better, as does the Bhagavatam and in every other literature about Krishna consciousness. Okay. Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram by Srila Sanatana Goswami, the glories of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and it goes like this. Sarva Shastabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabho, Kalidwandodita Ditya, Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madgudo Man Mahadana Man Nishtadaka Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhu tadayin Ati nichochata kada Hanamunchagadachin mam Premna rit kantayos Buddha. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we've reached the 79th chapter of the 10th canto. Lord Balarama has just killed Ramaharshan Sutta, kind of disrupting the sacrifice of Jaranya, but he very intelligently, as usual, solved the whole thing and put these Sutta Goswami in as the chief speaker. And Sutta Goswami just happened to have been present when Shukadev Goswami spoke to Srimad-Bhagavatam. So then they'll be able to speak the Bhagavatam, which is good for everybody. But now he's going to follow the advice of the Brahmanas at the sacrifice and go on pilgrimage. And he's also going to eliminate one of the last demons that was killed by Krishna and Balarama, except for the Battle of Kurukshetra, which is going on now while he's doing this. So Lord Balaram goes on pilgrimage. This chapter describes how Lord Baladev satisfied the Brahmanas by killing Balvala, bathed at various holy pilgrimage sites, and attempted to dissuade Bhimasena and Duryodhana from fighting. At the sacrificial arena of the sages at Naimisharanya forest, a harsh wind began to blow on the new moon day, spreading the obnoxious smell of pus and obscuring everything with dust. The demon Balvala then appeared there with a trident in his hand, his massive body pitch black and his face very frightening. Lord Baladev caught the demon with his plow and then struck him a ferocious blow on the head with his club, killing him. The sages chanted Lord Balaram's glories and presented him with lavish gifts. Lord Balaram then began his pilgrimage, during which he visited many holy tirthas. When he heard news of the battle between the Kurus and Pandavas, the Lord went to Kurukshetra to try to stop the duel between Bhima and Duryodhana. But he could not dissuade them from fighting. So deep was their enmity. Understanding that the fight was the arrangement of fate, Lord Baladev left the battlefield and returned to Dvaraka. Sometime later, Balaram again went to the Naimisharanya forest, where the sages performed a number of fire sacrifices on his behalf. Lord Baladev reciprocated by granting the sages transcendental knowledge and revealing to them his eternal identity. Text 1. Shukadeva Goswami said, "Then, on the new moon day, O king, a fierce and frightening wind arose, scattering dust all about and spreading the smell of pus everywhere." Text 2. Next, onto the sacrificial arena came a downpour of abominable things sent by Balvala, after which the demon himself appeared, trident in hand. 3 and 4. The immense demon resembled a mass of black carbon. His top knot and beard were like molten copper, and his face had horrible fangs and furrowed eyebrows. Upon seeing him, Lord Balaram thought of his club, which tears to pieces his enemies' armies, and his plow weapon, which punishes the demons. Thus summoned, his two weapons appeared before him at once. 5. With the tip of his plow, Lord Balaram caught hold of the demon Balvala as he flew through the sky, and with his club the Lord angrily struck that harasser of Brahmanas on the head. Text 6. Balvala cried out in agony and fell to the ground, his forehead cracked open and gushing blood. He resembled a great mountain struck by a lightning bolt. Purport. According to the Acharyas, the demon appeared reddish with blood like a mountain red with oxide. Text 7. The exalted sages honored Lord Rama with sincere prayers and awarded him infallible blessings. Then they performed his ritual bath just as the demigods had formerly bathed Indra when he killed Vritra. Text 8. They gave Lord Balaram a Vaijayanti garland of unfading lotuses in which resided the goddess of fortune, and they also gave him a set of divine garments and jewelry. Text 9. Then, given leave by the sages, the Lord went with a contingent of Brahmanas to the Kaushuki river, where he bathed. From there he went to the lake from which flows the river Sarayu. Text 10. The Lord followed the course of the Sarayu until he came to Prayag, where he bathed and then performed rituals to propitiate the demigods and other living beings. Next, he went to the ashram of Pulaharishi. Purport. Pulaha ashram. Pulahashram is also known as Harichetra, 11 to 15. Lord Balaram bathed in the Gomati, Gandaki, and Vipasha rivers, and also immersed himself in the Shona. He went to Gaya, where he worshipped his forefathers, and to the mouth of the Ganges, where he performed purifying ablutions. At Mount Mahendra, he saw Lord Parashuram and offered him prayers. And then he bathed in the 7 branches of the Godavari river, and also in the rivers Vena, Pampa, and Bhimarati. Then Lord Balaram met Lord Skanda and visited Sri Shaila, the abode of Lord Gidisha. In the southern provinces, known as Dravidadesh, the Supreme Lord saw the sacred Venkata hill, as well as the cities of Kamakoshni and Kanchi, the exalted Kavari river, and the most holy Sri Ranga, where Lord Krishna has manifested himself. From there he went to Rishabh mountain, where Lord Krishna also lives, and to the southern Mathura, that's Madurai. Then he came to Setubanda, where the most grievous sins are destroyed. Purport. Usually, one goes to Gaya to worship deceased forefathers, but as Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains, although Lord Balaram's father and grandfather were still alive, it was on his father's order that he carefully worshipped his forefathers at Gaya. Drawing insight from the Vaishnava Toshini, the Acharya further explains that although Lord Balaram was in the immediate proximity of Jagannath Puri, he did not go there, since he wanted to avoid the embarrassment of having to worship himself among the forms of Sri Krishna, Balabhadra, and Subhadra. 16 and 17. There at Setubandhu, Rameshwaram, Lord Halayuddha gave Brahmanas 10,000 cows in charity. He then visited Kritamala and Tamraparni rivers and the great Malaya mountains. In the Malaya range, Lord Balaram found Agastya Rishi sitting in meditation. After bowing down to the sage, the Lord offered him prayers and then received blessings from him. Taking leave from Agastya, he proceeded to the shore of the southern ocean, where he saw goddess Durga in her form of Kanya Kumari. Text 18. Next, he went to Palguna Tirtha and bathed in the sacred Panchapsara lake, where Lord Vishnu had directly manifested himself. At this place, he gave away another 10,000 cows. 19 to 21. The Supreme Lord then traveled through the kingdoms of Kerala and Trigarta before visiting Lord Shiva's sacred city of Gokarna, where Lord Durjati, Shiva, directly manifests himself. After also visiting goddess Parvati, who dwells on an island, Lord Balaram went to the holy district of Shurparaka and bathed in the Tapi, Payoshni, and Nirvindya rivers. He next entered the Dandaka forest and went to the river Reva, along which the city of Mahishmati is found. Then he bathed in Manu Tirtha and finally returned to Prabhas. Text 22. The Lord heard from some Brahmanas how all the kings involved in the battle between the Kurus and Pandavas had been killed. From this he concluded that the earth was now relieved of her burden. 23. Wanting to stop the club fight then raging between Bhima and Duryodhana on the battlefield, Lord Balaram went to Kurukshetra. 24. When Yudhishthir, Lord Krishna, Arjuna, and the twin brothers Nakula and Sahadev saw Lord Balaram, they offered him respectful obeisances, but said nothing, thinking, what has he come here to tell us? Purport. Srila Prabhupada writes, the reason they were silent was that Lord Balaram was somewhat affectionate toward Duryodhana, who had learned from him, who had learned from Balaramaji the art of fighting with a club. Thus, when the fighting was going on, King Yudhishthira and the others thought that Balarama might have come there to say something in favor of Duryodhana, and therefore they remained silent. 25. Lord Balaram found Duryodhana and Bhima with clubs in their hands, each furiously striving for victory over the other as they circled about skillfully. The Lord addressed them as follows. 26. Lord Balaram said, King Duryodhana and Bhima, listen. You two warriors are equal in fighting prowess. I know that one of you has greater physical power and the other is better trained in technique. That's because he trained him in technique. Purport. Bhima was physically more powerful, but Duryodhana was more advanced in terms of technique. 27. Since you are so evenly matched in fighting prowess, I do not see how either of you can win or lose this duel. Therefore, please stop this useless battle. 28. Shukadeva Goswami continued, they did not accept Lord Balaram's request, O king, although it was logical, for their mutual enmity was irrevocable. Each of them constantly remembered the insults and injuries he had suffered from the other. 29. Concluding that the battle was the arrangement of fate, Lord Balaram went back to Dvaraka. There he was greeted by Ugrasena and his other relatives, who were all delighted to see him. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that the word dishtam, fate, indicates that the battle between Bhima and Duryodhana had been enjoined by Lord Krishna and set into motion by him. Text 30. Lord Balaram returned to Naimisharanya, where the sages joyfully engaged him, the embodiment of all sacrifice, in performing various kinds of Vedic sacrifice. Lord Balaram was now retired from warfare. Purport. Srila Prabhupada writes, when Lord Balaram went to the holy place of pilgrimage at Naimisharanya, the sages, saintly persons, and Brahmanas all stood up to receive him. They understood that Lord Balaram, although a Kshatriya, was now retired from the fighting business. The Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas, or the Brahmanas and the sages, who were always for peace and tranquility, were very pleased at this. All of them embraced Balaram with great affection and induced him to perform various kinds of sacrifices in that sacred spot of Naimisharanya. Actually, Lord Balaram had no business performing the sacrifices recommended for ordinary human beings. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he himself is the enjoyer of all such sacrifices. As such, his exemplary action in performing sacrifices was only to give a lesson to the common man, to show how one should abide by the injunctions of the Vedas. Is it more than 11 minutes?
Yeah, we just got a comment by Vilas Manjaridas a few minutes ago. She said we made it to 15 minutes and the sound is clear.
Hare Krishna. We're defeating the Facebook demon. Oh, don't take that personally. You're okay. You're great. We're with you. Okay, Haribol. 31. The all-powerful Lord Balaram bestowed upon the sages pure devotion, pure spiritual knowledge, by which they could see the whole universe within him, and also see him pervading everything. Oh, by the way, just another bit of information. I got in touch with Davide, who's the owner of the Facebook account that I use in order to record on this thing. And he was telling me, maybe it's because, what kind of phone did you get? He said, it sounds like it looks like a movie or something. He was very impressed with the quality of the sound and the quality of the picture. So, let's hear it for improvement. The all-powerful Lord Balaram bestowed upon the sages pure spiritual knowledge, by which they could see the whole universe within him, and also see him pervading everything. 32. After executing with his wife the Avabrita ablutions, the beautifully dressed and ornamented Lord Balaram, encircled by his immediate family and other relatives and friends, looked as splendid as the moon, surrounded by its effulgent rays. Purport. Srila Prabhupada beautifully describes this scene as follows. Lord Balaram then took the Avabrita bath, which is taken after finishing sacrificial performances. After taking his bath, he dressed himself in new silken garments and decorated himself with beautiful jewelry. Amidst his relatives and friends, he appeared to be a shining, full moon amidst the luminaries in the sky. 33. Countless other such pastimes were performed by mighty Balaram, the unlimited and immeasurable Supreme Lord, whose mystic Yogamaya power makes him appear to be a human being. 34. All the activities of the unlimited Lord Balaram are amazing. Anyone who regularly remembers them at dawn and dusk will become very dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Vishnu. Purport. Srila Prabhupada writes, Lord Balaram is the original Vishnu. Therefore, anyone remembering these pastimes of Lord Balaram in the morning and evening will certainly become a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus his life will become successful in all respects. Thus ended the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 79th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Balaram Goes on Pilgrimage. Jai Baladev Ji Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol, Hari Hari Bol. Okay, one of our favorite chapters is coming up now. This is called Chapter 80. The Brahmana Sudama visits Lord Krishna in Dvaraka. This chapter relates how Lord Krishna worshipped his Brahmana friend Sudama, who came to his palace seeking charity, and how the two of them discussed the pastimes they had shared while living at the home of their spiritual master, Sandipani Muni. The Brahmana Sudama, a personal friend of Lord Krishna's, was completely free of material desires. He maintained himself and his wife with whatever came of its own accord, and thus they were poverty-stricken. One day, Sudama's wife, unable to find any food to prepare for her husband, went to him and asked that he visit his friend Krishna in Dvaraka and beg some charity. Sudama was reluctant, but when she persisted, he agreed to go, reflecting that an opportunity to see the Lord was extremely auspicious. His wife begged a few handfuls of flattened rice as a gift for Sri Krishna, and Sudama set off for Dvaraka. As Sudama approached the palace of Lord Krishna's principal wife, Rukmini Devi, the Lord saw him from a distance. Krishna immediately rose from his seat on Rukmini's bed and embraced his friend with great joy. Then he sat Sudama down on the bed, washed his feet with his own hands, and sprinkled the wash water on his head. After this, he presented him with various gifts and worshipped him with incense, lamps, and so on. Meanwhile, Rukmini fanned the shabbily dressed Brahmana with a yak-tail whisk. All of this astonished the residents of the palace. Lord Sri Krishna then took the hand of his friend, and the two of them reminisced about the things they had done together long ago while living in the school of their spiritual master. Sudama pointed out that Krishna engages in the pastime of acquiring an education only to set an example for human society. That's the summary. Text 1, King Parikshit said, "My Lord, O Master, I wish to hear about other valorous deeds performed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mukunda, whose valor is unlimited." Text 2, O Brahmana, how could anyone who knows the essence of life and is disgusted with endeavoring for sense gratification give up the transcendental topics of Lord Uttama Shloka after hearing them repeatedly? Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti comments herein that we see many persons who, even after hearing the topics of the Lord repeatedly, give up their spiritual dedication. The Acharya replies that the word Visheshagya is therefore significant here. Those who have actually understood the essence of life do not give up Krishna consciousness. A further qualification is to be Vishana Kama Marganai, disgusted with material sense gratification. These two qualities are complementary. One who has experienced the real taste of Krishna consciousness automatically becomes disgusted with the inferior taste of material pleasure. Such a genuine hearer of the topics of Krishna cannot give up hearing about the Lord's fascinating pastimes. Text 3. Actual speech is that which describes the qualities of the Lord. Real hands are those that work for Him. A true mind is that which always remembers Him, dwelling within everything moving and non-moving. And actual ears are those that listen to sanctifying topics about Him. Purport. While continuing from the previous verse to glorify the sense of hearing dedicated to the Lord, King Parikshit mentions the other senses also, so that we gain a complete picture of Krishna consciousness. Here he declares that without any connection to Krishna, the Supreme Lord, all the organs of the body become useless. A similar statement is made by Shonaka Rishi in the second canto, 3rd chapter, verses 20 to 24. Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti mentions that the senses should work together in Krishna consciousness. In other words, whatever the eyes or the ears experience, the mind should simply remember Krishna, who is within all things. Text 4. An actual head is one that bows down to the Lord in His manifestations among the moving and non-moving creatures. Real eyes are those that see only the Lord, and actual limbs are those which regularly honor the water that has bathed the Lord's feet, or those of His devotees. 5. Sutta Goswami said, thus questioned by King Vishnurata, the powerful sage Badarayani replied, his heart fully absorbed in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. 6. Shukadeva Goswami said, Lord Krishna had a certain Brahmana friend named Sudama, who was most learned in Vedic knowledge and detached from all sense enjoyment. Furthermore, his mind was peaceful and his senses were subdued. 7. Living as a householder, he maintained himself with whatever came of its own accord. The wife of that poorly dressed Brahmana suffered along with him and was emaciated from hunger. Purport. Sudama's chaste wife was also poorly dressed, and whatever food she obtained to give to her husband, and whatever she obtained, she gave to her husband. Thus she remained fatigued from hunger. 8. The chaste wife of the poverty-stricken Brahmana once approached him. Her face dried up because of her distress. Trembling with fear, she spoke as follows. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the chaste lady was especially unhappy because she could not obtain food to feed her husband. Further, she was fearful to approach her husband because she knew that he did not want to beg for anything other than devotion to the Supreme Lord. Text 9. Sudama's wife said, O Brahmana, isn't it true that the husband of the goddess of fortune is the personal friend of your exalted self? That greatest of Yadavas, the Supreme Lord Krishna, is compassionate to Brahmanas and very willing to grant them his shelter. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains in his commentary how the Brahmana's wife anticipated every possible objection her husband might make. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains in his commentary how the Brahmana's wife anticipated every possible objection her husband might make to her request that he go to Lord Krishna to beg charity. If the Brahmana might say, how could the husband of the goddess of fortune befriend a fallen soul like myself? She replies by saying that Lord Krishna is Brahmanya, very favorably disposed toward the Brahmanas. If Sudama might claim to have no real devotion for the Lord, she replies by saying that he is a great and wise personality who would surely obtain the shelter and mercy of the Lord. If the Brahmana might object that Lord Krishna is equally disposed to all the countless unhappy conditioned souls suffering the fruits of their own karma, she replies that Lord Krishna is especially the Lord of the devotees. And thus, even if he himself did not grant Sudama his mercy, certainly devotees engaged in serving the Lord would mercifully give him some charity. Since the Lord protects the Sattvatas, the members of the Yadu dynasty, what difficulty would there be for him to protect a humble Brahmana like Sudama? And what fault would there be in his doing so? 10. O fortunate one, please approach him, the real shelter of all saints. He will certainly give abundant wealth to such a suffering householder as you. 11. Lord Krishna is now the ruler of the Bhojas, Vrishnis, and Andakas, and is staying at Dvaraka. Since he gives even his own self to anyone who simply remembers his lotus feet, what doubt is there that he, the spiritual master of the universe, will bestow upon his sincere worshipper prosperity and material enjoyment, which are not even very desirable? Purport. The Brahmana's wife here implies that since Lord Krishna is the ruler of the Bhojas, Vrishnis, and Andakas, if these opulent rulers merely acknowledge Sudama as a personal friend of Krishna's, they could give him everything he required. In this connection, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti comments that since Lord Krishna had at this point put aside his weapons, he no longer traveled outside his own capital of Dvaraka. Thus, Srila Prabhupada writes in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Brahmana's wife said, "I have heard that he never leaves his capital city, Dvaraka. He is living there without outside engagements." As mentioned here, material wealth and sense gratification are not very desirable. The reason for this is that in the long run, they give no real satisfaction. Still, Sudama's wife thought, even if Sudama went to Dvaraka and simply remained silent before the Lord, he would certainly give him abundant wealth, as well as shelter at his lotus feet, which was Sudama's real objective. Texts 12 and 13. Shukadeva Goswami continued, when his wife thus repeatedly implored him in various ways, the Brahmana thought to himself, to see Lord Krishna is indeed the greatest achievement in life. Thus he decided to go. But first he told her, "My good wife, is there anything in the house I can bring as a gift? Please give it to me." If there is anything. Purport. Sudama was naturally humble, and thus, although at first he was dissatisfied with his wife's proposal, finally he settled his mind and decided to go. Now the last detail was that he had to take a gift for his friend. Text 14. Sudama's wife begged 4 handfuls of flat rice from neighboring Brahmanas, tied up the rice in a torn piece of cloth, and gave it to her husband as a present for Lord Krishna. Text 15. Taking the flat rice, the saintly Brahmana set off for Dvaraka, all the while wondering, how will I be able to have Krishna's audience? Purport. Among other things, Sudama assumed that the gatekeepers would stop him. 16 and 17. The learned Brahmana, joined by some local Brahmanas, passed 3 guard stations and went through 3 gateways, and then he walked by the homes of Lord Krishna's faithful devotees, the Andakas and Vrishnis, which ordinarily no one could do. He then entered one of the opulent palaces belonging to Lord Hari's 16,000 queens, and when he did so, he felt as if he were attaining the bliss of liberation. Purport. When the saintly Brahmana entered the precincts of Lord Krishna's palaces, and then actually entered one of the palaces, he completely forgot everything else, and thus his state of mind is compared to that of one who has just achieved the bliss of spiritual realization. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes from the Padma Purana, Uttarakhanda, wherein we learn that the Brahmana actually entered the palace of Rukmini. Satu Rukminyantak Puradvari Chanam Tushnem Stita. He stood for a moment in silence at the doorway of Queen Rukmini's palace. Text 18. At that time, Lord Achyuta was seated on his consort's bed. Spotting the Brahmana at some distance, the Lord immediately stood up, went forward to meet him, and with great pleasure embraced him. 19. The lotus-eyed Supreme Lord felt intense ecstasy upon touching the body of his dear friend, the wise Brahmana, and thus he shed tears of love. Text 20 and 22. Lord Krishna seated his friend Sudama upon the bed. Then the Lord, who purifies the whole world, personally offered him various tokens of respect and washed his feet, O king, after which he sprinkled the water on his own head. He anointed him with divinely fragrant sandalwood, guru, and kumkum pastes, and happily worshipped him with aromatic incense and arrays of lamps. After finally offering him betel nut and the gift of a cow, he welcomed him with pleasing words. Text 23. By fanning him with her chamara, the divine goddess of fortune personally served that poor Brahmana whose clothing was torn and dirty, and who was so thin that veins were visible all over his body. The people in the royal palace were astonished to see Krishna, the Lord of spotless glory, so lovingly honor this shabbily dressed Brahmana. 26 and 25 and 26. The residents of the palace said, "What pious acts has this unkempt, impoverished Brahmana performed? People regard him as lowly and contemptible, yet the spiritual master of the three worlds, the abode of goddess Shri, is serving him reverently. Leaving the goddess of fortune sitting on her bed, the Lord has embraced this Brahmana as if he were an older brother." 27. Shukadeva Goswami said, continued, "Taking each other's hands, O king, Krishna and Sudama talked pleasantly about how they once lived together in the school of their guru." 28. The Supreme Lord said, "My dear Brahmana, you know well the ways of Dharma. After you offered the gift of remuneration to our guru and returned home from his school, did you marry a compatible wife or not?" Purport. Among civilized human beings, the question of ashrama or spiritual order is significant. In other words, every human being must execute prescribed duties as a celibate student, a married man or woman, a retired person, or a renunciant. Since Lord Krishna could see that the Brahmana was poorly dressed, he inquired if his friend had been properly married and was executing the duties of household life. Since he was not dressed as a renunciant, he would be without a suitable ashram unless he were properly married. Even though you are mostly involved in household affairs, your mind is not affected by material desires. Nor, O learned one, do you take much pleasure in the pursuit of material wealth? This I am well aware of. Purport. Lord Krishna here reveals that in fact he was well aware of his friend's situation. Sudama was actually learned and spiritually advanced, and therefore he was not interested in ordinary sense gratification, as is the common man. Text 30. Having renounced all material propensities which spring from the Lord's illusory energy, some people execute worldly duties with their minds undisturbed by mundane desires. They act as I do to instruct the general populace. 31. My dear Brahmana, do you remember how we lived together in our spiritual master's school? When a thrice-born student has learned from his guru all that is to be learned, he can enjoy spiritual life, which lies beyond all ignorance. Text 32. My dear friend, he who gives a person his physical birth is his first spiritual master, and he who initiates him as twice-born Brahmana and engages him in religious duties is indeed more directly his spiritual master. But the person who bestows transcendental knowledge upon the members of all the spiritual orders of society is one's ultimate spiritual master. Indeed, he is as good as my own self. 33. Certainly, O Brahmana, of all the followers of the Varnashram system, those who take advantage of the words I speak in my form as the spiritual master, and thus easily cross the ocean of material existence, best understand their own true welfare. Purport. One's father is a natural object of reverence, as is a religious leader who initiates one into sacred ceremonies and instructs one in general wisdom. But ultimately the bona fide spiritual masters learned in the transcendental science and thus able to take one across the ocean of birth and death to the spiritual world. Such a guru is most deserving of worship and respect, for he is the direct representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as stated here. Text 34. I, the soul of all beings, am not as satisfied by ritual worship, Brahminical initiation, penances, or self-discipline as I am by faithful service rendered to one's spiritual master. Hare Krishna. Purport. The word prajati here indicates either begetting good children or the second birth, obtaining by ritual initiation into Vedic culture. Although both of these are praiseworthy, Lord Krishna here states that faithful service rendered to a bona fide spiritual master is still higher. 35 and 36. O Brahmana, do you remember what happened to us while we were living with our spiritual master? Once our Guru's wife sent us to fetch firewood, and after we entered the vast forest, O mighty armed one, an unseasonable storm arose with fierce wind and rain and harsh thunder. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti explains that this storm arose during winter and was therefore unseasonal. Then, as the sun set, the forest was covered by darkness in every direction, and with all the flooding, we could not distinguish high land from low. Text 38. Constantly besieged by the powerful wind and rain, we lost our way amidst the flooding waters. We simply held each other's hands and in great distress wandered aimlessly about the forests. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami points out that the verb paribabrima may be understood to be the prefix pari with either the verb brin or brahm. In the case of brahm, it indicates that Krishna and Sudama wandered all about, and in the case of bri, which means to carry, it indicates that as the two young boys wandered about, they continued to carry the firewood they had secured for their spiritual master. That's sweet. Text 39. Our Guru Sandipani, understanding our predicament, set out after sunrise to search for us, his disciples, and found us in distress. 40. Sandipani said, O my children, you have suffered so much for my sake. The body is most dear to every living creature, but you are so dedicated to me that you completely disregarded your own comfort. 41. This indeed is the duty of all true disciples, to repay the debt to their spiritual master by offering him with pure hearts their wealth and even their very lives. Purport. One engages one's body to realize one's purposes. The body is also the basis of the material conception of I, which, while one's fortune, is the basis of the concept of mind, conception of mind. Thus, by offering everything to the spiritual master, one realizes oneself to be an eternal servant of the Lord. The spiritual master does not exploit the disciple, but rather engages him fully in Krishna consciousness for the disciple's eternal benefit. Text 42. You boys are the best of the twice born, and I am satisfied with you. May all your desires be fulfilled, and may the Vedic mantras you have learned never lose their meaning for you, in this world or in the next. Purport. Cooked food left sitting for 3 hours is called yatayama, indicating that it has lost its taste. And similarly, if a devotee does not remain fixed in Krishna consciousness, the transcendental knowledge that once inspired him on the spiritual path will lose its taste or meaning for him. Thus, Sandipani Muni blesses his disciple that the Vedic mantras, which reveal the absolute truth, will never lose their meaning for them, but will remain ever fresh in their minds. 43. Lord Krishna continued, we had many similar experiences while living in our spiritual master's home. Simply by the grace of the spiritual master, a person can fulfill life's purpose and attain eternal peace. 44. The Brahmana said, what could I possibly have failed to achieve, O Lord of Lords, O universal teacher, since I was able to personally live with you, whose every desire is fulfilled at the home of our spiritual master. Purport. Sudama Brahmana wisely understands his extraordinary good fortune of having lived with Sri Krishna at the residence of their spiritual master. Thus, whatever external difficulties they experienced were actually an expression of the Lord's mercy to teach the importance of service to the spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada renders the learned Brahmana's feelings as follows. Sudama said, my dear Krishna, you are the Supreme Lord and the Supreme Spiritual Master of everyone. And since I was fortunate enough to live with you in the house of our Guru, I think I have nothing more to do in the matter of prescribed Vedic duties. O Almighty Lord, your body comprises the absolute truth in the form of the Vedas, and is thus the source of all auspicious goals of life. That you took up residence at the school of a spiritual master is simply one of your pastimes in which you play the role of a human being. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 80th chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled The Brahmana Sudama Visits Lord Krishna in Dvaraka. Hari Bol, Jai Shri Krishna. Sudama Brahmana Ki Jai. Sudama Brahmana Ki Jai. Lord Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. All right, that's it for tonight for the reading, and we made it through without having to stop and start. It was some kind of conquer. Well, we didn't have anything to do with it. It was the electricity and all that stuff. Hare Krishna. Okay, time for our open mic session. Anybody who had anything that's stuck in the minds in that beautiful reading today? Yes, Honest John is going to start us off.
I thought it was kind of I don't know, just when Sudama's wife started playing all the scenarios in her head, like, well, what if he says this and I'm going to say this, and what if he says that and I'm going to say this? It's like playing a scenario over and over, so she gets every answer for whatever opposition that he could come up with. I thought that was cute, but you know, we do that. I do that sometimes. Play games in my head about, well, what if they say that? What if they do that? You know, so it just observation. But and also it was nice how he described how the body parts become real as you use them for Krishna's purposes, which was another nice point.
Yeah, I think the thing you're pointing out is culture. It's how real cultured people deal with one another. And now, in human society now, you can see the opposite. People are so gross with one another. Even the leaders are supposed to be, like they're supposed to speak with gentle words even in the assembly houses of great, saintly persons like the Pandavas and the Vrishnis, before they would speak, even if they had something opposite to say, they would always be obliged to praise the person they were speaking to first, which made it easier for the person to hear. So, these little, things that happen everywhere in every social circumstance, but in the Vedic culture, they were always done in such a way as it maintained the dignity of each person and the tendency of each person to approach Krishna consciousness or remember Krishna in their daily dealings. So she's poor and she wants to serve her husband. So she knows he's got friends in high places. Got the highest friend in the highest place. Right? Anyway, we'll see in the next chapter what happens as a result of that humility and that sincere desire just to please the husband, and his sincere desire to satisfy his wife and go to see Krishna. I remember, what was it? As he was going, he was thinking how fortunate he was just to be able to go and see Krishna. That was his main, and I think he forgets, doesn't he? He forgets to offer the offering that he brought, that his wife gave him. All he could do was think about how wonderful Krishna is. And then he left and didn't ask for anything. Anyway, we'll read about that tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Yeah, that's not sweet. Honest John, thank you very much. Pointing out the actual dealings, human dealings, that helps all of us elevate ourselves and be proper so that we can have a peaceful atmosphere to live in. Because without a peaceful atmosphere, we can't be happy. Without happiness, we can't think of Krishna. We can't want to think of Krishna. Too much anxiety, especially nowadays. Sarva. Oh, Doug. Oh, Doug. Sarva's just deferred to you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I was reflecting when hearing about Sudama Brahmana when he was on his way to meet Krishna. Actually said at one point he was wondering how he's going to actually be able to get through and see Krishna. There's so many guard posts and everything, and as he's worrying about that, it's just all of a sudden he's entered into this group and these other Brahmanas are walking, and he just makes his way somehow. He's just there at the entrance. And I was thinking about sometimes in devotional service, or especially a few experiences going on books, I may start thinking about, what's going on? I gotta be careful here, be undercover. What if I get caught? All these things might go wrong. And the sooner I can just get in the mindset of all right, I'm just doing this for Krishna. Let's just focus on Krishna and giving him to others. Then all those other worries kind of go out of my mind. And in relation to this experience, it's like Krishna's arranging everything himself anyway. He makes it work for you.
Exactly. So I was thinking something when that same scene came up, and I was thinking, the Brahmanas can go anywhere. So he just, even though he was not confident enough to go himself, he just, okay, I'll go with them. And because the Brahmanas can go everywhere, they don't, even to this day, I'm a sannyasi, and when I go to India, there's rare exceptions where you can't go, but most places, they'll let you in, even at the big, government places and this and that, they'll let you in. You can walk in, generally speaking. Of course, it's changing. Now it's changing. With all the terrorism business and everything, they don't know who's going to dress up like Bhima and Arjuna and Krishna did to come in and pick a fight. But it's a fact that again, it comes right back to the Vedic culture. When there's real culture, then children, who will stop a child from going somewhere? They don't, it's just generally not done. And the same goes with Brahmana, the same goes with senior person, elderly persons. This last trip I had to go in the wheelchair, because I just couldn't walk it, I couldn't do it. And so, I was being wheeled around and people would look at me and I'd smile and they'd smile and give their, some kind of, sorry, some kind of little special respect, because And then the one guy, he was one of the guys that was coordinating the wheelchairs and everything. He looked at me as I got out of the thing. He said, well, at least you actually need it. And then he told me that one flight he had, there were 20 or 30, and none of them needed it. They were just doing it in order to get perked, get the first on the airplane, or, you know what I mean, not have to do some trouble. So he was experiencing, he was expressing that. So Vedic culture, everybody's acting properly. They know what to do because they're all following Krishna's laws, the religious principles. Sarva, did you have something?
I'm sorry, Maharaj. I'm really dull tonight.
Okay. Prana.
Well, yeah, I was going to comment, but you can
Go ahead, Patrick. You got it. It's all yours.
Hare Krishna, I was really kind of thinking about the text John brought up, I think it was 4 and 5, about the parts of the body being utilized in Krishna's service, and it reminded me of Pranahari's class today. There was a verse from Vasudeva speaking on how everything's coming from Krishna, is for Krishna, from Krishna, in relation to Krishna, and seeing how when we actually engage our parts, everything in Krishna's service, that's when it's actually being utilized perfectly. That's when it's actually...
Is that what the kids mean, is woke? That's what the kids mean, is being woke. Hey kid, are you woke? Take one of these. This will teach you how to be really woke. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Wake up. Dial in. Dial your senses and your mind and your words, and dial it in. Here you go. Take this book. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I was also the text where Sudama Brahmana was being asked by his wife, and then he just contemplated in his head, rather than going because of her pleas, he just decided, well, I get to see Krishna, the supreme person. That's the best benediction. Yeah. And he just like, okay, now I'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought those texts by what Maharaj Parikshit said was really amazing. I think it was text 2, or the concomitant factors of giving up material sense gratification, and then that taste for hearing, I guess, of Krishna's pastimes. Just some glorification of hearing Bhagavatam, essentially, in any of the Vedic literature. So I like when Maharaj Parikshit sometimes speaks up in the Bhagavatam and says something like this, because it's kind of like the efficacy. He usually speaks about hearing.
Yeah.
I was thinking in the second canto, in the 8th chapter of the second canto, he also says some really nice verses about hearing Bhagavatam. And it just shows that he's hearing the Bhagavatam, and then he's glorifying the hearing process, so we kind of get that insight into what nectar he's relishing by actually hearing properly. So that was just an appreciation.
Yeah, when I heard that, I was thinking how happy I was to be with all of you and to hear the Bhagavatam every night. I mean, she really changes her life. Life changes, no doubt about it. Makes life more, more worthwhile, actually, worth living. Real happiness. What was it? That's what was the word. Real happiness comes from this. The senses, when they do this, then they become really, goes to your point also. How the eyes and the ears, when they're doing these things, then they become real. They're valuable, and they're an asset, and they take us in the right direction. and the conditioned soul are just kind of wandering around, you know, like a ping pong ball or a what is the machines? What are pinball machines? Yeah.
They probably don't even know what pinball machines are. Those are old school.
Yeah, they have new kinds of games now. Imagine the kids, poor kids, they right from the get-go, they get these games and they look like they're going into another world and everybody's being violent and all these things. I mean, what chance does a kid have nowadays? You know, very, very small chance. Now, the Bhagavatam, all these things, Balarama's like dragging Bala down, looking, all right, whack, Teach the kids these things, at least they relate to Krishna, right? Yes, Matthew.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
One of the things I noticed in text 32 of chapter 80 that we were reading, it's the second part of it is that it says, "But a person who bestows transcendental knowledge upon the members of all the spiritual orders of society is one's ultimate spiritual master. Indeed, he is as good as myself." It reminds me about how His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of ISKCON, really embodied that. He gave this
he's
Krishna consciousness
to
to
the whole world. He's real Jagat Guru. In India, they called themselves Jagat Guru, and they've never been out of their village. Some of them. Yeah. Yes, Pranav.
One more question, or I have a question. Towards the end of the chapter, we heard about the benediction given to Krishna and Sudama from their guru Sandipani Muni, that their basically the transcendental knowledge that they receive won't lose its taste. It'll always be inspiring. This is a very
important point. Yeah.
And it says in the purport that if a devotee does not remain fixed in Krishna consciousness, then he can lose that. So I guess my question is, what does it mean to remain fixed? How do we do that so we don't lose our taste?
It means to use the knowledge. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam that says that unused education, unused knowledge is like water in a pot that's got a crack in the bottom. It just goes out the bottom. So if you don't use the knowledge, if you don't preach, if you don't try to explain it to others, if you don't relish like we're relishing, it stays alive. And if it doesn't, if it's just for you, then eventually it will dry up. Misused or unused education. If a person's morose in Krishna consciousness, it means he's not Krishna conscious. He's doing something wrong and needs to check it. Check what he's doing wrong and then correct himself. Because Krishna consciousness is ahaituki apratiyata. It does not depend on external circumstances. Period. It flows. Once it starts to flow, nothing can stop it. But we can stop it in the sense that it's flowing from us, and if we choose not to use the things, this kind of ties into what I was trying to say last night before we got all this confusion about stopping and starting and stopping and starting. I was trying to say something that, the verses, every once in a while in the Gita, there's these lists of very beautiful qualities that are divine qualities, or there's characteristics of those who are actually liberated. They always are thinking to do good to others, for instance, or they're humble and prideless and honest and clean and truthful and charitable and kind and all these things. And it's hard in the age that we're living in now, where the so-called leaders of human society, are treating each other so viciously, and so, if not viciously, at least, with disdain or just respect, lack of respect, the dignity, the kneelings. I was in a wheelchair, and there was these two millennial kids, and they were the ones that were doing. Usually, they have little older people do that because they know that it's these two kids, and I was in one wheelchair, and another person was in it, and these two kids, they were just going on, hey man, where were you doing? And we're like sitting there, it's just, and we could. I looked at the person, and he looked at me, and he said, "Yep, it's right, isn't it?" And we didn't say anything. We said, but we could understand that these people had not a clue of what they were doing or how they were supposed to be with people who have special needs and special care, and especially young kids, that they're losing that ability to have respect for elders and to take, to be careful. So, yeah, Bhagavatam is there to teach us all these things. Everything's there all at once. It's such a wonderful experience to learn and hear and associate with persons who know how to act, know what to do and know what not to do at every moment of human life. Hare Krishna. I'm going to stop now. It's almost 7:30. Thank you much, everyone. Thank you, everyone out there in cyberspace. And lucky for us, we didn't have to torture you by turning it off and turning it on, and having you have to go through different, part 5, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. It's more difficult.
There's one comment.
It just went off?
There's one comment.
One comment. We got a comment from the cyberspace.
Yes. This is Rasa Rasika.
Oh, Rasa Rasika. We need to connect. I'm sorry, I was really busy the last 3 days. I haven't had a chance to respond to your letter.
Right.
It's on my to-do list.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my obeisances.
Haribol, mine to you, glories to Prabhupada.
As we know, Balaram is the original spiritual master and gives us the capacity for spiritual strength to carry out devotional service. Can you please elaborate on how Lord Balaram gives us spiritual strength for our service?
Well, Lord Balaram is the source of all strength, and he's also the first person, well, not in terms of time, but in terms of relationship, who has an attitude, who is thinking that he's a servant of Krishna. Lord Balaram is the expansion of Krishna who thinks that he's a servant of Krishna. And therefore he is the spiritual master of all spiritual masters, and therefore the knowledge of how to be a servant of Krishna proceeds from him and from who else? Srimati Radharani. These two personalities teach us how to be, devotional service is proceeding from them. So therefore, he gives us the strength, he gives us the knowledge, he gives us the enthusiasm, and literally, Lord Balaram Lord Vishnu is an expansion of Balaram. So the material energy, the material atmosphere, the resources, everything that we need to keep ourselves together and to learn anything, it's all coming from Lord Balaram. So he gives us the strength, he gives us the knowledge through everything, actually. That's all that came into mind tonight. But I do have a letter, to connect with you, Rasa Risika Prabhu, to get to know you better and to talk more about how to make this experience that we have of these daily readings, how to get it out there, properly. So I'm looking forward to having more exchanges with you soon. And thank you for your question. Hare Krishna. Glories to Prabhupada. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. See you all tomorrow, Central Time, USA, 6 o'clock, same time, same place, same station. Hare Krishna. Here in Radha Lane. Hari Bol.